The grand conclave of the Cathar Imperium was a chamber designed to suffocate hope. Polished obsidian walls rose to a height that defied the eye, meeting a vaulted ceiling where a captive singularity pulsed with a cold, violet light. Its gravitational lensing, a constant, silent reminder of the power wielded by the assembled species. The air, meticulously recycled for a dozen different biologies, tasted of ozone and ancient stone. Here, history was not merely recorded. It was an oppressive weight, a physical presence in the room. High Prelate Vorlag, his chiseled granite-like form seated upon the throne of ages, felt that weight more than any other. His multifaceted eyes, glittering like chips of mica, scanned the faces of the consortium's delegates, each a monument to their own civilization's anxieties. For cycles, they had debated the human question, and for cycles, they had found only deeper chasms of fear. Grand Marshal Hakkar of the Signian hegemony, his avian features sharp and predatory, his ceremonial armor etched with the glories of 1,000 campaigns, slammed a gauntleted fist onto the holographic display before him. The image, a projection of the Sol system, wavered. "It is a feint," Hakkar hissed, his voice a low, grating cry that echoed in the cavernous hall. "This treaty of unfettered access they offer is a mockery. They offer us trade routes through their core worlds, access to their scientific archives, a seat on their Terran Council, all for nothing in return. No tribute, no territorial concessions, no technological fealty. In the history of this galaxy, an offer so generous has only ever been the prelude to absolute subjugation. The peace treaty is a trap." Vorlag let the silence that followed stretch, a tapestry woven from the fear of a dozen starfaring peoples. He saw the subtle ripple of agreement pass through the glimmering swarm's representative. Its composite mined a silent chorus of pragmatic assent to Hakkar's paranoia. The confluence, a shimmering column of light and synchronized insectoid bodies, did not speak, but its collective intent was as clear as a star in the void. They who had devoured worlds for resources understood the logic of overwhelming force masked by benevolence. They saw in humanity a potential competitor of terrifying scale. "Your evidence remains circumstantial, Grand Marshal," a voice intoned, soft and melodic like the chiming of crystal spheres. It came from the Lumian emissary, a being of pure, coherent energy contained within a shimmering containment field. Its form was a gentle, shifting nebula of blues and golds. "Our deep-range empathic sensors detect no malice from the human species. We sense a profound quiet, a stillness. It is a state of being we have not encountered before. It is not the silence of a predator waiting to strike, but the silence of a deep ocean, vast and unknowable." Hakkar scoffed, a sharp clatter of his beak. "The unknowable is what forges empires into dust, emissary. The humans expanded from their single world to 1,000 in the span of a single Cathar generation. They did not conquer. They did not colonize in the way we understand. They arrived on barren worlds and with terrifying speed ignited life upon them. Their technology reshapes planetary environments as if they were molding clay. Yet they have never fired a single shot in anger at another sentient species. They have never laid claim to an inhabited world. This passivity is the most aggressive strategy I have ever witnessed. It is a psychological war, designed to lull us into a state of complacent dependency. They offer us their knowledge, their resources, so that when our own systems become reliant on their miraculous technologies, they can simply turn them off. When the talks for this treaty inevitably fail because we refuse to walk into their gilded cage, they will come for us. They will come locked and loaded, and we will have been disarmed by our own foolish hope." Vorlag closed his primary eyes, focusing his secondary set on the star charts swirling in the center of the hall. Human territory was a bloom of soft, cerulean light, expanding not like an empire's brutalist stain, but like a nebula gracefully coalescing. It did not push against the consortium's borders. It flowed around them, filling the empty spaces between the great powers, a patient tide of creation. The Cathar had risen to dominance through conquest. Their history was written in the orbital debris of their rivals. Hakkar's logic was the logic of their shared past, a brutal but honest calculus of power. An entity that did not seek to dominate was either a lie or a fool, and the humans were clearly not fools. Confluence has analyzed the potential resource gains. The swarm's collective voice buzzed, 1,000 whispers speaking as one. Human terraforming technology could triple the agricultural output of our hive worlds. Their energy sciences promise post-scarcity power generation. The risk of deception is high, but the potential reward is existential. A failure to engage could be as devastating as a failed war. If we stagnate while they ascend, we are rendered irrelevant. A slow death is still death. Vorlag felt the pressure of the decision coiling in his ancient heart. The consortium was a fragile alliance born from the ashes of the last galactic war. It was a union of survivors, each species bearing the scars of its own violent history. They understood threats they could see, fleets they could count, weapons they could analyze. Humanity presented none of that. They were a philosophical void, a mirror that reflected the consortium's own deepest insecurities. Were they truly a new form of life, one that had transcended the primal urge for conquest? Or were they simply the most patient, most intelligent predator the galaxy had ever produced? They have agreed to send an envoy, Vorlag stated, his voice a low rumble of shifting stone. A single vessel. It will arrive at the designated neutral point in 3 rotations. Hakar's feathered crest flared in agitation. A single ship, an insult, or worse, a test of our resolve. They send a lone lamb to see if the wolves will bite. If we destroy it, they have their casus belli. If we receive it, we appear weak, supplicant. Or perhaps, the Lumian emissary countered, its light pulsing gently, they send a single vessel because they believe a single vessel is all that is required for a conversation. They operate from a position of confidence, so absolute that the idea of a military escort does not even occur to them. This, more than anything Hakar had said, sent a chill through Vorlag. The Grand Marshal's fear was a familiar one, the fear of the soldier. But the Lumian's observation hinted at a different kind of power, a power so vast and ingrained that it no longer needed to be displayed. It was the power of a being that knows it cannot be harmed, not because of its armor, but because of its fundamental nature. What kind of civilization produced such an attitude? What had they seen in the dark between the stars that had given them such serenity? Vorlag's mind drifted to the initial reports. Human ships, when scanned, were strange. They possessed drive signatures that bent spacetime in ways that Cathar physicists deemed impossible, a silent, effortless glide that left no energetic wake. Their hulls were composed of materials that seemed to actively refuse analysis, shifting their quantum state under deep sensor probes. And their power sources were undetectable, registering as a perfect cold void, a patch of absolute zero against the background radiation of the cosmos. Every piece of data was a contradiction. A civilization with the apparent power to reshape worlds should radiate energy, ambition, and threat. The humans radiated nothing. They were a perfect cipher. "We will receive the envoy," Vorlag declared, his tone leaving no room for further debate. Hakar stiffened, his dissent a palpable force in the room, but he did not speak. The High Prelate's word was law. "We will listen, we will observe, we will look into the heart of this mystery, but," Vorlag added, his gaze fixing on the Cygnian Grand Marshal, "our fleets will be on high alert. Every ship in the consortium armada will be ready. We will show this envoy the courtesy of our full attention and the respect of our fully charged shields." He did not say the rest aloud, but every being in the chamber understood. They would talk peace, but they would prepare for a war unlike any they had ever known. They would listen to the words of the human, but they would trust only in the cold, hard logic of their own history, a history that screamed one undeniable truth: power never offers itself for free. The price was always paid, eventually, in blood and fire. The talks, in a sense, had already failed before they began, for the consortium was incapable of hearing a language it did not believe could exist. They were coming to the negotiation table already locked and loaded, their own paranoia the heaviest weapon in their arsenal. The designated meeting point was the Penumbra system, a place of stark and haunting beauty. A white dwarf star, the fading ember of a long-dead sun, cast a ghostly silver light upon a single, tidally locked planet of black volcanic glass. It was a place of endings, a celestial tomb chosen for its neutrality and its lack of strategic value. Into this solemn silence, the consortium fleet had emerged from hyperspace, a breathtaking display of military might. Cathar dreadnoughts, their jagged, asteroid-like hulls designed to inspire terror, hung in the void like mountain ranges. Sleek Cygnian battlecruisers, shaped like raptorial birds with wings swept for a killing dive, formed a precise, menacing perimeter. The swarm's living hiveships pulsed with a sickening, organic light, their interiors teeming with billions of warriors. It was a fleet that could crack a continent, a statement of power intended to be overwhelming. High Prelate Vorlag stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Indomitable Will. Beside him, Grand Marshal Hakar stared into the void, his posture rigid with anticipation. For hours they had waited. The human was late, a fact Hakar had pointed out with increasing vitriol, calling it another calculated insult, a power play to make them wait. "They mock us," Hakar grated. They demonstrate that our time, our fleets, our power mean nothing to them. Vorlag remained silent, his ancient mind processing the scene. The sheer kinetic and energetic potential of the assembled armada was staggering. They had brought enough force to extinguish the dwarf star itself, and all of it was aimed at a single point in empty space, waiting for one ship. The disparity was unsettling. It felt less like a show of strength and more like an act of profound desperation. They were like a primitive tribe, banging their spears and chanting their war cries at a silent moon, trying to frighten it into revealing its secrets. Then it happened, not with a flash of light or a wrenching of space-time. There was no grand arrival. The human ship was simply there. One moment there was empty space. The next, the ship occupied it. The transition was so seamless, so utterly silent, that for a long moment nobody reacted. The sensor arrays, which had been screaming with high-energy scans, reported nothing. No dimensional tear, no hyperspace wake, no energy discharge. The vessel had not arrived. It had simply chosen to become present. It was smaller than a Cygnian scout frigate, a sliver of absolute black against the stardusted void. Its shape was an elegant, impossible curve, a fluid form that seemed to defy Euclidean geometry. It had no visible engines, no weapon emplacements, no viewports, no bridge. It was a perfect, featureless sculpture of night. As the consortium's sensors tentatively probed it, the data that returned was nonsensical. The ship's mass was indeterminate, fluctuating as if it existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. Its hull temperature was absolute zero. It did not reflect the light of the nearby star, it consumed it. A wave of unease washed over the indomitable Will's Bridge. The hardened Cathar crew, veterans of brutal campaigns, shifted uncomfortably. This was not a warship. Warships were designed to be understood, to project threat in a recognizable language of turrets and missile pods. This vessel was an aesthetic statement, a piece of physics-defying art whose very existence was a quiet declaration of technological superiority, so immense it bordered on the divine. "Hail them," Vorlag commanded, his voice betraying none of his inner turmoil. A communication channel was opened. For a long, tense minute there was only static. Hakar's hand hovered over the fleet-wide fire control panel. "A trick! They are deploying some kind of system warfare package." Then a voice filled the bridge. It was female, calm, and carried a warmth that was utterly at odds with the cold, alien vessel from which it emanated. It spoke perfect, unaccented Cathar high ritual, a complex language reserved for the most sacred diplomatic and religious ceremonies, a language that took Cathar scholars decades to master. "This is Ambassador Alara Vance of the Terran Vessel Odyssey. We greet the consortium in peace. High Prelate Vorlag, Grand Marshal Hakar, we are honored by your presence." The ambassador's voice was serene, devoid of any discernible fear or arrogance. She named them, she knew their titles, she saw their entire fleet, and she spoke as if she were addressing old friends at a garden party. The psychological dissonance was staggering. "Ambassador," Vorlag replied, his own voice sounding harsh and guttural in comparison. "You are late." There was a brief pause. "My apologies, High Prelate. There was a temporal distortion in our transit. From our perspective, we have arrived precisely on schedule. The nature of causality can be subjective at this level of travel. We will endeavor to be more mindful of your frame of reference in the future." The explanation was both a perfect apology and an unbelievable boast. Hakar's feathers bristled. "Temporal distortion? Your drive systems manipulate time." "That is a simplified but not entirely inaccurate description," the voice of Alara Vance replied, still with that unnerving placidity. "It allows for travel that is not only faster than light, but also gentler on the fabric of the universe. We find it more elegant." Elegant, the word hung in the air, a quiet indictment of the consortium's brute force hyperspace drives that ripped open reality with savage energy. Vorlag felt a profound sense of dislocation. This was not how first contact with a potential adversary was supposed to proceed. There was no posturing, no veiled threats. Only a calm, almost professorial exchange of information. The humans were not playing the same game. In fact, it was becoming clear they did not even see it as a game at all. "We are prepared to receive you aboard this vessel, Ambassador," Vorlag said, asserting some measure of control. "That is most gracious, High Prelate, but it will not be necessary. For the sake of clarity and transparency, I believe it would be best if our initial conversation were held in a more open forum. I will transmit my holographic signal to your bridge, if you permit it. It will allow all of your assembled commanders to bear witness." Hakkar immediately objected. Absolutely not. A holographic signal could contain a viral code, a mimetic weapon. We can isolate the signal in a quantum buffer, Grand Marshal, the lead technician reported, his voice tight. But the processing power required to analyze it in real time, it would be immense. The complexity of their transmission protocols is... He trailed off, shaking his massive, stony head. Permit it, Vorlag commanded. A column of blue light solidified on the center of the bridge. It resolved into the image of a human female. She was smaller than any Cathar, fragile-looking in a simple dark gray uniform that bore no rank or insignia. Her features were soft, her skin pale. Her eyes, a shade of deep brown, held a look of patient intelligence. She was utterly, terrifyingly unassuming. This was the representative of the species that could ignite suns on dead worlds. This was the face of the great galactic threat. She looked less like an ambassador and more like a scholar, a librarian. "Thank you, High Prelate," she said, her projected image turning to face him. Her gaze was direct, yet gentle. "I am Alara Vance. I am here to discuss the Treaty of Unfettered Access and to answer any questions you may have about my species." Hakkar stepped forward, his form towering over the hologram. "I have a question, human. Why make this offer? What do you gain from giving us the keys to your kingdom?" Alara Vance looked at the Grand Marshal, and for the first time a flicker of something new entered her expression. It was not fear or anger. It was a profound, ancient sadness. "We gain allies, Grand Marshal. We gain partners. We gain fellow travelers." "Allies against whom?" Hakkar pressed. "There are no other powers in this galactic arm of our stature. Are you proposing an alliance against the Cathar, the Swarm?" He gestured around the bridge. "We are the consortium. We are united. Who is this enemy that we would need you to face?" The ambassador's gaze drifted from Hakkar to Vorlag, and then seemed to pass through the walls of the ship, out into the stardusted void beyond. The air on the bridge grew heavy, charged with an unspoken gravity. The calm, professional diplomat was gone, replaced by something older, more somber. "The enemy is not a fleet," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more resonant than a shout. "It is not an empire. It has no name, for there has been no one left to name it. It is a phenomenon, a filter." Vorlag felt his mandibles clench. This was an unexpected turn. He had anticipated a discussion of economics, of military parity, of spheres of influence. He was not prepared for a lecture on cosmic eschatology. "Explain this filter," Vorlag commanded, his voice low and dangerous. Alara Vance turned back to him, her expression one of deep, solemn seriousness. "High Prelate, your civilization is ancient and wise. You have studied the stars for millennia. Have you never wondered at the silence?" "The silence?" Hakkar scoffed. "The void is not silent. It is filled with the transmissions of 1,000 nascent cultures, the roar of quasars, the hum of creation." "Is it?" the ambassador asked softly. "You hear the nursery, the toddlers just learning to speak. But where are the adults? Where are the old ones? In a galaxy that has existed for billions of years, teeming with worlds that could support life, the stars should be ablaze with the light of ancient Type III civilizations. The entire electromagnetic spectrum should be a cacophony of their communications, their energy signatures, their works. But it is not. There is no one home. There is only us and the children in the cradle. This is what my people call the Great Silence." A hush fell over the bridge. Every being present understood the theoretical concept, the Fermi paradox. It was a philosophical puzzle, a topic for late-night debates among astronomers. But the human ambassador was not speaking of it as a theory. She spoke of it as an observed, tactical reality. "Civilizations rise," she continued, her voice weaving a chilling narrative. "They discover fire, then the wheel, then the atom. They reach for the stars. They build networks, they expand, they achieve a certain level of technological and energetic proficiency. And then they vanish, completely. We have surveyed over 100,000 galaxies. We have found the ruins of millions of advanced societies. All of them went silent at approximately the same technological threshold. A threshold the consortium is now rapidly approaching." Hakkar's bravado seemed to shrink in the face of her calm, terrible pronouncement. "Wiped out by what? A natural disaster, a plague, self-annihilation." "None of those," Alara Vance said. "The pattern is too consistent, too precise. It is not chaos, it is methodology. We do not fully understand the nature of the force behind it. We call it the Hunter. It is not a being in a ship. We believe it is a signal. A mimetic, self-replicating code that propagates through a civilization's own advanced communication networks." Or perhaps it is a weaponized physical law, a cascade of false vacuum decay triggered by a certain type of energy signature. All we know for certain is that once a civilization becomes loud enough to be noticed, it is silenced, permanently. The hologram of the ambassador gestured, and the air beside her shimmered. A new image appeared, a star chart of their local galactic arm. It was dotted with the familiar lights of the consortium and human space. But then, new symbols began to appear, ghost-like and red. They were markers, thousands of them, scattered across the starfields. "These are the ghosts," she said quietly. "Civilizations our deep-range archaeology has confirmed existed. Here, a race of silicon-based lifeforms that built Dyson swarms. They went silent 800,000 years ago. Here, an aquatic species that had mastered gravity manipulation. Silent 1.2 million years ago. And here," she indicated a region alarmingly close to Cathar space, "a civilization of immense psychic potential. We found only their planets, scoured clean of all complex life, their psychic resonance utterly extinguished. The pattern is always the same, a sudden, final, all-encompassing silence." Vorlag stared at the map of the dead. The weight of galactic history he had felt in the conclave chamber was nothing compared to this. This was the weight of a graveyard of gods. His own people's proud history, their bloody conquests and grand empires, seemed like the squabbles of insects on a single leaf in a forest that was on fire. "And humanity?" Vorlag asked, his voice a dry rasp. "How have you survived this, Hunter?" This was the crux of it, the question upon which the fate of all their civilizations now rested. Alara Vance's sad smile returned. "Because we saw the pattern early," she said. "When we first reached for the stars, we were loud, we broadcast our existence with arrogant joy, and then we found the first ghost, and another, we understood, we fell silent. Our entire civilization turned inward, we did not cease to advance, we learned to advance quietly." She gestured to the image of her own ship, the impossible silent odyssey. "Our technology is not designed for conquest, it is designed for stealth. Our timeless drive leaves no wake for anything to follow. Our zero-point energy sources create no detectable signature. Our worlds are shielded, not from fleets, but from observation, cloaked in information-theoretic fields that make them appear as unremarkable, barren rocks to any deep-range scan. We have spent 10,000 years turning our entire civilization into a whisper in a cosmos where a shout is a death sentence." The full implication of her words crashed down upon the bridge of the indomitable will. The human expansion, their terraforming of dead worlds, it wasn't colonization. It was building a buffer zone. It was creating a network of silent, shielded bastions. They hadn't been avoiding the consortium out of fear or arrogance. They had been deliberately keeping their distance, trying not to draw the attention of the hunter to this noisy, vibrant corner of the galaxy. "The treaty," Vorlag breathed, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "The offer of unfettered access is an invitation," Alara Vance finished for him. "An invitation to come inside the silence. We are offering you the technology to shield your worlds, to quiet your energy signatures, to hide your civilizations from the thing in the dark. We are offering you a place behind the wall we have spent millennia building. The resources, the knowledge, they are not a bribe. They are the tools you need to survive." She turned to Hakkar, whose face was a mask of stunned disbelief. His entire worldview, built on the primacy of military might, had been rendered utterly irrelevant. The enemy was not something you could fight with battleships and strike craft. The enemy was a fundamental rule of the universe. "You said you believed the talks would fail and that we would come locked and loaded, Grand Marshal," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You were right in a way. Our talks with the universe have failed. There is no negotiating with the hunter. And yes, we have come locked and loaded. Our entire species, every ship, every world is in a constant state of readiness. Our weapons are not aimed at you. They are aimed outward at the great emptiness. They are the systems that maintain the silence. They are the guardians on the wall of reality. We did not come here to conquer you. We came here to offer you shelter from the storm." Silence, a silence more profound and complete than any Vorlag had ever experienced, descended upon the bridge. The hum of the life support, the thrum of the mighty engines, the very breathing of the crew seemed to fade away. All that was left was the chilling truth, laid bare by the calm, sad-eyed woman in the column of light. The peace treaty was not a trap. It was an ark. And the humans were not predators. They were shepherds, desperately trying to gather a flock that did not even know it was being stalked. Grand Marshal Hakkar sank to his knees. The gesture, for a proud Cygnian warrior, was more shocking than any explosion. It was the physical manifestation of a spirit breaking, of a lifetime of certainty being ground to dust. He looked at his hands, at the controls for a fleet that could level planets, and he saw only the useless toys of a child. Vorlag felt the foundations of his own ancient civilization tremble. The Cathar had always seen themselves as the pinnacle of galactic evolution, the inheritors of the cosmos. They had been wrong. They were simply the next in a long, silent line for the slaughter. Humanity had not underestimated them. The consortium had failed to comprehend the sheer scale of humanity's burden. They had mistaken a quiet, grim determination for passivity. They had mistaken caution for weakness. They had looked at a guardian and seen only a threat. Why, Vorlag finally asked, the single word encompassing a universe of questions. Why help us? Why not just maintain your own silence? We are not your kin. Our histories are violent, our empires built on principles you seem to have abandoned. Alara Vance's holographic form seemed to grow in stature, imbued with a moral authority that dwarfed the military power surrounding her. Because we were once like you, she said, her voice filled with an empathy that was as powerful as any weapon. We were violent. We were conquerors. We warred with ourselves and nearly destroyed our own cradle world. We know the darkness that resides in the heart of a young species. But we also learned that survival is not a zero-sum game. The universe is vast and terrifying, but the spark of sentient thought, of life reaching out to understand itself, is incalculably rare and precious. Every time a voice is silenced, the universe becomes a little darker, a little colder. We will not stand by and watch another light go out, not if we can prevent it. She paused, letting the weight of her declaration settle. The treaty asks for nothing in return because the survival of another thinking species is the return. It is the only payment that has ever mattered. We don't want your worlds or your tribute. We want your minds. We want your artists, your scientists, your philosophers. We want your voices to join ours in the great, quiet conversation. We want you to live. The Bridge of the Indomitable will had become a holy place, a sanctuary where old sins were being washed away by a terrible, beautiful truth. The crews on the other ships, listening in across the fleet, were held in the same thrall. Hakkar, still on his knees, looked up at the human, his predatory eyes now filled with a dawning awe. The trap had not been in the treaty. It had been in their own minds, forged by millennia of fear and aggression. They had been their own jailers. Vorlag, High Prelate of the Cathar Imperium, leader of the consortium, a being who had not bowed his head in 1,000 years, inclined his great stony form in a gesture of profound respect. "Ambassador Vance," he said, his voice thick with an emotion his people rarely expressed. "Your terms are accepted." The alliance was forged not in the fire of battle, but in the cold light of cosmic horror. The great consortium armada, once a symbol of intimidation, became the first class in humanity's school of survival. Human engineers and scientists, no longer hiding their true capabilities, emerged to work alongside Cathar, Cygnian, and Swarm technicians. The process was a revelation. Human technology was not merely advanced, it was philosophically different. It was elegant, symbiotic, and deeply intertwined with the fundamental laws of the universe. They did not conquer physics, they harmonized with it. Shielding systems were installed around the consortium's core worlds. Drive signatures were silenced. Communication networks were rerouted through quantum-entangled relays that left no trace. The loud, boisterous civilizations of the consortium began to learn the art of the whisper. Vorlag and Alara Vance spent long periods in conversation, not as diplomat and prelate, but as two minds bridging a gulf of biology and history. He learned of humanity's long, lonely vigil, of the psychological toll of being the galaxy's silent guardians. She learned of the Cathar's deep traditions, of the burden of their violent past, and of their capacity for change. A new sense of purpose united the once fractious consortium. The old rivalries and border disputes seemed laughably petty in the face of the great silence. They were no longer Cathar or Cygnian or Swarm. They were survivors, partners in a pact of mutual preservation. Hakkar, his pride replaced by a fierce, protective loyalty, became the staunchest advocate for the new doctrine of quiet advancement, his military genius now dedicated to the strategies of stealth and defense. The emissary of the Luminians found a deep resonance with humanity's philosophy, seeing it as the ultimate expression of cosmic empathy. The Swarm, ever pragmatic, saw the ultimate logic in a strategy that guaranteed the continuation of the hive. The integration of their sensor networks was the final step. Humanity's deep-range observatories, vast instruments hidden in the voids between galaxies, were linked with the consortium's own arrays. For the first time, the combined perception of all the great species was focused outward, a single, unified eye searching the darkness. They monitored the hunter's signature, tracking its ghostly passage through distant galaxies, learning its patterns, refining their defenses. They were becoming a true galactic community, united not by empire, but by a shared, terrifying secret. It was during one such unified observation cycle that the anomaly occurred. A deep-field sensor, one of humanity's oldest, positioned to look out of the galactic plane into the intergalactic void, picked up a signal. It was impossibly faint, a mere whisper buried beneath the cosmic microwave background radiation. At first, the combined network's AI dismissed it as noise, a random quantum fluctuation. But the signal repeated. And it was not random. It was structured. It was a message. Alara, Vance, and Vorlag were in the primary observatory on Luna, Earth's moon, when the data was flagged. Before them, a holographic display showed the signal, translated into a visual waveform. It was elegant, complex, and utterly alien. "It is not the hunter," Alara said, her voice tight with a tension Vorlag had never heard from her before. "The hunter's signal is a weapon. It is chaotic, destructive, designed to overwhelm and erase. This is language." For days, the brightest minds of all their species worked to decipher it. The message was ancient, its carrier wave redshifted to a degree that suggested it had been traveling for billions of years, from a point of origin far beyond their local supercluster of galaxies. It was a message from another universe, or from a time so early in their own that the laws of physics may have been different. It was a relic from the dawn of everything. Finally, they broke the primary encryption. It was not a complex cipher. It was a simple, universal key based on the fundamental constants of nature, the speed of light, the Planck constant, the charge of an electron. It was a message designed to be understood by any civilization that had mastered basic physics. The message itself was short, composed of concepts, not words. Vorlag stood beside Alara, his ancient heart pounding with a rhythm he had not felt since he was a young warrior facing his first battle. The translated concepts appeared on the screen, stark and clear, hanging in the darkness of the observatory like new stars. Question: do you hear the silence? Statement: the great filter is not an end. Statement: it is a gate. Invitation: we survived, we are waiting. Coordinates: beyond the shore of night. A profound, shattering awe filled the room. The hunter, the great silence, the millions of extinguished civilizations. It was not a cosmic plague, it was a test. A horrifying, brutal, impossibly cruel test of a species' ability to be wise instead of loud, to be cautious instead of arrogant, to seek harmony over dominance. It was a filter designed to weed out the aggressive, the short-sighted, the ones who would burn down the cosmos with their unchecked ambition. And humanity, in their lonely fear and quiet determination, had passed. They had solved the puzzle not with force, but with humility. They had become the shepherds, and in doing so, they had proven themselves worthy of entering the pasture. The treaty had not been a trap, it had been the key. The human offer was not just for survival, it was an invitation to take the next step in cosmic evolution, to graduate. Vorlag looked at Alara Vance. Her face was illuminated by the light of the message, and her eyes were filled with tears, not of sadness, but of an overwhelming, soul-shaking hope. The burden she and her people had carried for so long had been lifted, replaced by a new, even more profound purpose. Their long vigil was over. A new journey was about to begin. "It seems," Vorlag rumbled, his voice filled with the wonder of a being staring into the face of God, "that the galaxy is larger than we ever imagined." Alara nodded, a slow, single movement. "We thought we were hiding in the dark," she whispered, "but all this time we were just waiting for the dawn." Beyond their shielded corner of the Milky Way, the universe was not a graveyard. It was a doorway. And for the first time in a billion years, someone was on the other side, holding it open. The true journey was just beginning.